very much indeed for coming to talk to us. You chair the London Assembly's Transport Committee. Can you tell us a little bit about the work and what actually that committee does?
Absolutely. Well, it's great to be with you today and to talk about our work. But if we take a step back, what is the London Assembly? A lot of people don't know that. But when you go out to vote for the Mayor of London, you also vote for London Assembly members, and there's 25 of us. And our job is to hold the Mayor to account, but also to hold all of his different functional bodies, as they're known. People like Transport for London, the Met Police, the Fire Brigade, all of these different areas. We're there to hold them to account and hold the Mayor to account, and to make sure that he's spending public money wisely, and to challenge him where we think there are issues, such as in the area of transport. So on the Transport Committee, which I chair, we carry out a number of investigations. I've been rotating chair since 2008, and we've carried out a huge number of investigations looking at things like the tube and the upgrades of the tube, the bus network, from walking to cycling. We did a very visionary piece of work on cycling, which the Mayor has adopted a lot of it, and obviously our recent piece of work has been on taxi and private hire services.
Talking of the taxi and private hire services, you recently conducted an inquiry. What led you to do that? In other words, what made you look into that subject?
Well, when we looked at the range of topics that we had covered over recent years, it was the one area we just had not looked at. We'd done river services, we'd done walking, cycling, and the road network. We hadn't actually looked at taxi and private hire. And we've always had quite a range of complaints from both the taxi industry and private hire. But with the arrival of people like Uber as well, it felt really that it was the topic we needed to look at. And that's why we spent considerable time looking at it and money doing some actual proper research, talking to passengers and talking to drivers to really understand the issues.
And were you surprised at the amount of evidence that you received in that inquiry? And also, were you surprised at the amount of people that expressed concerns and worries about the future?
I knew we would get a huge response, but we were delighted, really, rather than surprised by the number of individual drivers, not just the representative bodies, the number of individual drivers who got in touch. And we did proactively go out to hear from drivers. So we had about 1,000 leaflets we were handing out, our team were handing out, we were giving out both at private hire offices and out to taxi drivers. We were tweeting a lot, we were using the internet, so we really wanted to engage with drivers and passengers, and that's why we did this really good research. We employed a company to do that. We spoke to over 1,000 passengers to get their views of both taxi and private hire and understand their issues, to really help shape this piece of work, to make sure that Transport for London will take it seriously.
What would you highlight as being the key recommendations from the study?
Well, it's a very, very detailed report, and we actually have 19 recommendations. There were so many issues that we felt needed to be addressed. But, one of the overarching ones is there is no strategy or vision at Transport for London, all coming from the Mayor of London, of where they want to see the taxi and private hire industries going in the future, and therefore what support they need to maintain them and grow them. And that seems to be one of the key things that's missing. And alongside that is the real need for enforcement. We know that touting is a really serious problem and a very dangerous problem for passengers, and we need to make sure that that is properly tackled. And we look at the number of enforcement officers in cities like New York, it's 5 times the number that we have in London. We want to see a much bigger enforcement team, and for TfL to take that side of the role seriously. And one of the other things is investing in infrastructure. Every other mode of transport, infrastructure is invested in to upgrade the tube or to invest in more buses. But things like taxi ranks, we could not believe there's a huge backlog and there were no plans for when they would be installed. We need to make sure taxi ranks are available throughout London, particularly with things like the 24-hour tube coming, and getting the infrastructure invested in is also a key part of our recommendations.
The taxi industry and taxi drivers in particular are very concerned indeed, and you mentioned earlier Uber and other digital disruptors. These organisations are throwing vast amounts of venture capital money into public relations, into marketing. and there are huge concerns that the current methodology is just a technical way of getting round laws that Parliament made not that long ago, which should ensure the safety of the public, and the operation appears to be in complete contradiction of that. Is there anything you can say to give the industry some reassurance about the future?
We think overall that Uber is just the tip of the iceberg. It's almost just one issue compared to the whole range of issues that are affecting the trade. And, we were very concerned that TfL weren't looking forward. The technology is moving very, very fast. They need to, get to grips with this and to be ahead of the game rather than running to try and catch up. And I think, particularly now the Mayor has said that he actually thinks how Uber are operating is wrong. We think TfL maybe should actually be looking at that and maybe should have made a different ruling, but obviously that's now in the courts. But I do think technology is going to keep moving apace. There'll be more and more competitors coming into the market. They need to make sure that they are seen to be giving a level playing field to everyone. At the moment, their actions don't appear to show that.
The report has come up with a huge amount of recommendations, and it is indeed very detailed indeed. Do you think that TfL and the Mayor will listen and act? And does the Assembly have a good track record in that respect?
I think the Transport Committee does have a really good record on many of our reports, such as one we did on cycling. The Mayor's cycling vision reflected a huge amount of our recommendations. We've also done other ones on buses, and they're making some changes there and so on. So we do have influence. And actually, several years back, when we first had a massive load of snow in London, our report not only changed how TfL practice and the bus companies and others, but it also influenced the Select Committee and Parliament's work on that area. So we have got quite a bit of clout. I think it's very interesting. I have had an email from Transport for London already saying that they support many of our recommendations. I don't know what many is out of 19, but that's promising. And I look forward at the end of February at our Transport Committee to have a really good dialogue with Peter Hendy to understand where he's coming from and to see how many recommendations we can persuade him to adopt. But also the Mayor of London has got to have some leadership here. It needs a bit of political will as well, and he needs to show that leadership in this area.
Caroline, I've heard a rumour that you might be putting yourself forward to stand for the Mayor. Is there anything you can tell us that would encourage support of the taxi industry for you if you do stand?
Well, first of all, it is an if, and it's something I may well be considering, but clearly my party members would have to decide if I was to be the candidate. But clearly the report, though it is cross-party, is absolutely where I see we need the industry to go, and we need to have a proper vision and strategy and work to support the industry. We heard, certainly the taxi industry, we heard the evidence we had internationally where we said, this is the gold standard, and we could squander that unless we invest in it and support it. But one of the controversial things coming up, which we didn't touch in our report because the Environment Committee is going to look at it, is the issue of clean air in London and having to get rid of diesel vehicles in the centre of London particularly to clean up air. And I absolutely support this, but what we need to do is it cannot be the industry who's having to pay out huge amounts of money for this reform that's needed. And the Mayor has talked for a long time about a clean taxi fund, and that's never materialised. And that's something I think would need to be looked at as we move forward to look at cleaner electric vehicles in central London, because it's your business and your livelihoods, but you shouldn't be subsidising this change.
And finally, on a personal note, be interested to know, do you use taxis much? And if so, have you got a favourite taxi story?
Well, I have a 1-year-old, so the times I used to go out a lot more in central London and get a taxi back feel like they're long gone, as I'm at home with little one often in the evening. But, I think this is probably my most entertaining and interesting taxi journey, I have to say. But when I do get taxis, I like to talk to the drivers. It gives me a good idea of what's going on, what the issues are. I get a real feel. I often talk to them about the knowledge and things and other stuff, so I get a good feel of the industry, but also what the issues are that are affecting Londoners that they see every day, and that's valuable for my work as a London Assembly member.
Caroline Pidgeon, London Assembly member, chair of the Transport Committee, thank you very much indeed for answering all our questions. Much obliged.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for your time today.